there's lots of little kind of like nuance art pieces that kind of go towards like the Illuminati kind of idea of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
There are vast amounts of underground tunnels that go layers below. The theory, I don't want to say conspiracy theory, but the theory is that there are some other races, the lizard people and the grays, which is kind of like a subset of the human beings or whatever. They live underneath the Denver airport, right?
I totally slept in this morning.
Did you?
Yeah.
Well, what's
Sleeping in for me is like yesterday it was 8.
Okay.
And then today it was 7:30. Yeah. I don't know. It was nice. I'm definitely catching up.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you've been lots of driving, stress.
Yeah.
A lot of like sitting, a lot of nothing.
That's
At
true.
the same time, a lot of like, yeah. It's Jamie's. So remember Jamie's uncle that I was telling you about, the one that's like had face cancer a bunch of times,
yes,
stuff like that. He's in the hospital, and like grandma's up there to say goodbye. Ooh. Do you have a name for your toothpick? Do you call it just your toothpick?
I'd have to have like many names.
Many names?
Yeah, no, they're just toothpicks.
It's not like your wubby.
I treat it like it. It's totally my smokes, man. I wish that.
Oh yeah, that's what it's your thing.
It's the oral fixation for smoking, but well, that sucks. He's in the hospital.
Yeah.
It's no good.
But we were talking about it, right? Yeah. And it does suck, right? At the same time, like I hope that it's a rather quick process for him because he's in a lot of pain. You know, like he's not eating. He's, it's metastasis. It's all over the place. He's been on hospice, like pain care for a few weeks now. And they were finally like, this is all going south. So I don't ever want to be in that spot, right? I know like what pain is.
Right. And
like that constant pain where you, like when I hurt my neck. And it's a different like thing. And I was like, I would never want anybody to feel like that on a regular basis. So I hope it's a quick process.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's one of those like, all right, so let's look at flights, like, so do you want to leave on Wednesday?
Where are they?
They're in California. So it's just one of the, like, it'll just be Jamie to go, right? I've only met the guy a handful of times. We're not super close, or anything like that. But it sucks. He is a family member. Jamie's going to go there, be, all that. But it's one of those like, how long are you going to do all this for? And she's like, I don't know. I was like, you go as long as you need.
Yeah. I had an uncle of mine pass away earlier this year that I was, when I say I'm super close with, he was my, he's an uncle on my dad's side. All of my dad's family was in California for a really long time. And so every time we'd go out there for the holidays, we used to go out there all the time when I was a kid for Christmases.
Yeah.
And then when I became an adult, we took all the kids out there for summer vacation kind of stuff. And so we spent a lot of time out in, I was going to say Hollywood, out in California with the family. And that's when I would see him. So I did get to spend a lot of time with him. And it was fun to see the like relationship with him evolve as I grew up, because it's, he's the cool uncle when you're a kid that got us like skateboards for Christmas.
Okay.
And then eventually he becomes like the cool uncle that I go and have a drink with and, all those kind of different things. So he was a really, really good uncle. I really, really loved him. And when he passed away, we weren't able to make it. We weren't able to do the whole thing and going and doing the funeral and everything like that, the timing of it and the finances of it. And it was just like, fuck, one of those things where we knew that there were going to be like unintended consequences to moving, across the country. Because had we been back in Utah, we would have just hopped in the car and drove. Yeah. But it just is what it is. It sucks, dude. We both had, by us, I mean, you and me, we both have had some grief to deal with lately.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting emotion. Like it's one of those things that I've been thinking about it a lot, simply for obvious reasons, right? And I guess but the people listening don't know. Like recently, my wife's dad passed away, and so we had to go back to Utah and do all of those things that you do in that circumstance. So I've been thinking a lot about grief and how to process it, what it feels like to process all of those kind of things, And I have this, and theory isn't even a thing, right? But just this thought around it is, because I only associate grief with death or with loss, right? The ending of something, the ending of a relationship or whatever the case may be.
No more.
Yeah. But I do think that it's something that I probably carry with me all the time. I'm just not connected to it or tapped into it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Where it feels like it's an emotion that is in the background of life until it steps forward into the foreground. I mean, you could probably say that about every emotion.
Yeah. It's like Inside Out.
Yes.
Right?
Totally.
But as adults, right?
Yeah.
Like children have some basic emotions. And then as you become like a teenager, there's more emotions, right? But you're an adult, right? Like you've been around for a few decades.
Yeah.
Right? And so, you've got grief and anxiety and sorrow and sadness. And they're all different. Right? They're combinations they're the children of core emotions and stuff like that. But no, they're always there.
Yeah.
It's just who's at the wheel.
Yeah.
Right? Who's at the dashboard per se, driving the joysticks or whatever.
Steph and I have a joke about that because I don't think there is this character in Inside Out. It's been a while since I've seen the movie.
Well, there's two of them now.
I know. We gotta see the second one because it looked really good as well. And I don't think this character exists. I think we just made him up in our heads. But there's a character that we call Jimmy. And then there's the female version that's Jenny.
Okay.
And Jimmy's like the guy that's coloring on the walls and
that's the ADHD.
Yeah, he's the guy that they never let control the control board.
Yeah.
So like when everybody, the guy that's up there controlling controlling it falls asleep, then Jimmy sneaks up and starts fucking pushing stuff and doing all these different things. They're like, no, Jimmy, get back! You gotta go back to the closet. Get him back in the closet. It's not safe. And then Steph's got the equivalent with Jenny. So every now and then they hop on and start doing shit. And she's like, sorry, baby, I don't know what I was doing over there. Jimmy was in control.
Yeah. All of a sudden you wake up at 3:00 in the morning, just eyes open, just like, what are stars?
Yeah. Say the dumbest shit, the most inappropriate time.
Right? I think that there's definitely a lot of those things that are always, hidden there. And there's so many different things. We draw so much from different like movies and books and sayings and stuff like that. And this one's terrible, but I think of, for me, like PTSD, right? I can never. Mr. Brooks. You ever see Mr. Brooks?
Yeah.
His dark passenger. Yes, dark passenger. Right? Is that? I think
Dark Passenger. I think is
that's Dexter.
Dexter, but Mr. Brooks
was another good one.
Yeah.
He's got his like. I don't have a random guy walking around with me, who's like, do it. Right. I don't have that, but I have it like this, and that's what I kind of think about as like the dark passenger. Right? It's all these things that I try to. For me in this like time frame and all these different kind of emotions and feelings and thoughts, and they're all in this shadow, right?
Yeah.
And that's my dark passenger. I just dealt with this when we went to that Morgan Wallen concert, and I'm not gonna lie, I was overwhelmed. So much so, I'm pretty sure I sat there and cried, like. Not cried like, but like couldn't control my own emotions and just had tears running. And it was this flood of different things. I had never, not since I have gotten out of the Marine Corps, really been in a venue with 80,000 people.
Yeah.
And like, pyrotechnics and like the music and the lights are flashing and it's insane, right? and I totally overwhelmed, right? And it doesn't help. I think the guy who opened, Hardy, who's like a country singer, kind of like some stuff, comes out there and starts talking about this is for all the like first responders and all this, like, and he's talking about you guys have all lost somebody, and I'm singing for that person, and I'm like, oh my God. And I am sitting there, and Jamie, my wonderful, wonderful wife, is like, we fucked up. Like, she's like, we
oh shit, team.
Oh shit!
We
Yeah,
did not see this.
Oh yeah. Oh boy, didn't plan on this being a thing right now.
Yeah,
and I feel bad. She's super stoked about the concert, right? I'm excited to go to this concert. I'm excited. My wife's got her outfit on. I'm excited. She's looking great.
Yeah,
this is gonna be great.
Night, right?
Oh, great date night. We got a hotel up in Knoxville, and the kids are with grandparents. We're going. We're doing this thing, right? And I'm like, I don't want to ruin this right now because I'm so overwhelmed by everything that's going on, and I mean, I feel bad. At one point, she looked at me. She's like, "You got like 10 minutes," and not as a hey,
pull your shit together.
Pull your shit together. You better lock it up. Right. Lock it up. Not that. It was like, listen, like, and I'm like, no, I'm fine. And she's like, you're crying. We're at a concert right now, and you're shaking, and tears are running down your face. You're not okay.
Yeah.
Right. And she's trying to help me out and be there for me. And I'm like, I'm sweaty. I'm uncomfortable. It's terrible. I've got all these just flood of emotions coming back from what this guy is talking about to like, I'm like, and this is just my like, Jimmy is at the wheel and he's just fucking pulling Brodies in the park.
What this one does.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, and I'm like, if I was a bad guy, I would attack this place right now because there's 80,000 people and we're all just having a good time. And I was like, I like looked at Jamie, like, we need to get our wills in order. And she's like, what are you talking about? She's like, it's date night. And I'm like, I don't know how to stop ruining this whole event. And it took me a solid probably 20 to 30 minutes to like, we're going to be okay, and pull it all together. And then it was okay. And then I was like, all right, like, I'm good. You know, like we got through this. I kind of like sensed it all out. And I was like, all right, I really had to like mentally like build my walls back up in this space and like, who's everybody around me? Where's the exit? You know, and go through that whole like process. And it was overwhelming.
Do you want to pick it apart a little bit? Should we dive into it a little bit?
Oh, God, I really don't want to, but sure. Yeah, I was thinking about it on the way here, and I was like, oh, we could talk about this stuff a little bit. I was like, I really am not sure how I feel about all that.
Because I always think about, I mean, I think you probably know me enough by now where I'm like, I'm fascinated by, because I experience, you know, it's such a similar thing. It's like emotions are one of those things that dudes just have such a fucking hard time with.
Yeah.
And I can relate completely. I don't know if I've ever had, you know, something that extreme in regards to like being at a concert or a venue, but definitely a lot of the, like my anxiety flares up real bad at places like that. And I kind of have to be really on for a while until I'm able to kind of settle into it. So I'm curious, what was the, like, what do you feel like, was it initially just a sensory thing where there was just so much coming in, or what was the trigger for it all initially? Or sometimes I don't even think we know what the trigger is, right? It's always trying to pinpoint, why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling?
I think it was definitely sensory to start. And I think part of that is like, I'm already, I don't like big crowds. I don't like lots of people or loud noises. Like it's just silly, right? Like I'm like, but I was like, okay, we're going to be fine with this, right? Like we had a cocktail at the bar. I was like, we're going to be okay with all this. And as we were walking in to Nyland Stadium, like it's pretty busy, right? There's a lot of people going on and we're walking. And we're like, all right, we go through security, no big deal. And we were basically at like wherever everybody walked in, we were on like the other side. So they're like, oh, you can go left or go right. You're going to walk the same distance to get to the where your seats are. Right. And I was like, oh, that sucks. But all right. So we're going through the crowds. And it probably took us 15 minutes, I think, to even get to. In stadiums like that, they know this, right? And like the corridor keeps getting smaller and smaller because we're going to the far side where there's no entrances, no exits or anything like that. Everybody's coming out this way. So where we start, and it's this 40-foot wide mezzanine, beautiful and all this. And then by the time we've been walking for 15 minutes and we're doing the shoulder and I'm checking, is she with me? And people are bumping into you. And then the next thing you know, you're in this like 8-foot wide hallway and like you can see the ducting running through it. You're in the basement corridor, basically. And you're like, all right. And now you're going through all this and you're like, where am I? Like, there's no quick exit now. Like, I'm definitely, this is what I would have to deal with. And my brain starts kind of like thinking about that stuff. We get to our seat and the like opener was on. He had just started. And man, like they've got, because it's a light show nowadays. Yeah. It's not just like.
They're not just up there with their guitars singing.
No. There's like the 70 billion lumen, like boom, boom, boom going. And there's the pyrotechnics, man. And like some of that stuff, like that big, like, oh God, I like blowing shit up, right? Like who doesn't? I like shooting guns. I like blowing shit up. When all of a sudden you're sitting there and it goes like boom, boom, and you're like, oh, like I was not expecting that. And I think I was probably building as we walked through. My anxieties were rising.
For sure, yeah.
As we got deeper into that. And then I think as soon as we sat down and it was going, I was like, oh man, like, oh, we went too far, right? I messed up. Like, turn around. And yeah, that is where it started. And then as I tried, I think it was one of those, it's kind of like that perfect storm. Like I tried to pull myself out of that like pit of despair, that like misery, that dark passenger, like I'm trying to do that. And then the lead singer comes on. He's like, let's talk about all the guys that died. And I'm like, oh, there we go. Oh God. And then like all the, like all of the, it's hard for, I think everybody deals with this stuff differently. For me, I get these, it's like, it's not often that I get just like, and there's definitely times where I get like a memory that is a traumatic one that I have to like, let's process this, right? But when I get to that point, it's like a slideshow. Yeah. And it just starts rapid firing all these different things. And it's just getting hit in the face like 30 times with all this stuff. And it's just a punch, and it's like punching you down into it. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. And you just have to you almost have to ride it, I feel like sometimes. And sometimes you've got to, try to snap yourself out of it in that situation. Like, am I going to go like cry in the toilet or in the like bathroom for a minute? Like, there's no escaping.
Right.
Because I've walked 30 minutes down this basement corridor, right? So there's nowhere for me to go. I have my wife next to me who at least is like a rock for me, trying to like hold my hand and tell me it's going to be okay. And I'm like, oh, I understand it's going to be okay. Like, I don't think that anything bad's going to happen right here. I hope. But at the same time, like, I can't turn this off.
Do you feel like there's any part of you, because I think sometimes, at least I'm doing much better at this point in my life. It's not like I'm suddenly a master when it comes to processing emotion, but I tend to process it the best I can when it comes up. I tend to try to feel things as they rise up. I still bury stuff. I still stuff stuff down, but it's much different than I used to, where I just wasn't allowing myself space and time to feel and process and, go through anything. And so I'm curious, do you feel like if it was, because you've been going through a lot of stuff, even just stress wise in the last couple of, weeks, months, do you feel like it was just, you had a well of shit that was built up inside of you, that maybe this was just the opportunity for it to be released?
Yeah, I don't know if, like, I have been building on these things. Stress with work, my dog died the week before, you know, like so like that was hard for me. And just a lot of those things all working on top of each other. And I think we had probably gotten to like a breaking point, right? I don't know if I'd had the best 3 fucking months in the world, like there's a good chance it still would have been too much for me, right? I tried, like I told Jamie, I was like, no, I have to get through this. And she's like, we can just go. And I was like, no, I have to get through this. Like, and I'll be honest, like this is the stupidest thing. I'm sitting there and I'm like, all right, like, and I'm trying to like check in with myself and like, where are we at? Like, we're going to be okay here. And all I could think about was like, if I can't handle this concert, there's no way I can go to the Green Bay Detroit game in Green Bay, Wisconsin, or in Detroit. Like Detroit, Ford Field right now is considered like one of the loudest stadiums that is going on with the fan base and all that. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get to go watch my football team play a game like that. Like, and I'm, this is a trip that I'm planning with my son and my friend and Joe, right? And it's like, there's no way I can go do that and just be like, what is my son going to look at me and just be like, why is dad crying? Like, I don't understand. Why is dad freaking out right now? Or Joe, who you know, right, who is a friend. We haven't hung out a ton or talked about any of this stuff. He's just like, so I drove up to Michigan with this guy and he's in the stadium watching his...
He's having a meltdown.
He's having a meltdown in the stadium, you know? And he's like, do I get him another beer? I don't understand, right? And I was like, no, I have to get through this. I have to... And part of that is, I know I used to have this... Can we talk about doctors for a second?
No.
Okay.
There'll be no doctor
All right,
talk
we can't
on this
talk about
podcast.
doctors. The fucking doctors. I had this psychologist. So when I was in the Marine Corps, they were like, hey, you got to go talk to somebody. And I was like, all right, well, it really was bad. First, I had gotten my flight surgery. Somebody had diagnosed me with PTSD. And then my flight surgeon, I don't know who, I have an idea, but lined it out and initialed it and was like, no, he's good. So I could deploy again.
Okay.
Right. And I didn't think anything of it, especially when you're in the service, right? Like,
Yeah.
I never, like, whatever.
That's probably pretty common.
I don't know
Yeah.
how common that is. I know that when I got out and I was going through the VA, they were like, what is this? And I was like, I don't know. Like, my medical record's like this thick, you know? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what that is. But I had this whole thing had happened. I get back from that deployment, and they're like, hey, you got to go see somebody. I was like, all right. So they sent me to see this doctor. His name was Dr. Green. He was a naval psychologist who had gotten out and was working for the Marine Corps or for the Navy as a doctor, but he was no longer active duty. So he had like his, like, I was in the service too, so I understand. And I like look at his, like, all this stuff and I'm like, no, dude, you were in the military, but you never like did anything. Right.
Yeah.
And this guy's like, well, if the going to a store with a bunch of people bothers you, you need to do more of that. This immersion kind of like there. And I was like, yeah, fuck you. I'm not doing that. And he's like, well, that's what we need to do. And I was like, yeah, well, you can eat a bag of dicks. Like, I'm not doing that. And I did not get along with this guy. I thought he was an idiot, and mostly because I was just, not happy about any of this
Just really
stuff.
defensive.
Yeah,
about
super
everything.
defensive.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I get out of the Marine Corps, and the VA is like, hey, so you need to go talk to somebody. I was like, yeah, totally. I should probably do that. And they send me to the VA, and I go check in, and I open the door, and there's fucking Dr. Green sitting there, and I was like, you could shit me. I literally called. I was like, nah, you got to give me a different doctor. I can't deal with this guy. But I know that now, like, you do have to kind of like. It's you got to stress yourself a little bit to like help. You can't just sit there and like think about all of it. you still have to like do the work and go put yourself in these uncomfortable positions. You have to let those emotions kind of rise up so you can kind of work through those and process those things. And you like when you're talking about these terrible things that happen and then processing in that and so unintentionally that happened, right? And I was like, I've got to process all this, and it sucked. Yeah. And it was. I mean, literally, like for a moment there, I was fearful of dying just sitting in the stadium watching a concert, which is just like.
So on top of all the emotions, is it all the, the catastrophizing?
Oh yeah,
and we're thinking about worst case scenarios, and we're like, we're so fucked in this position, and then you expand it from not just where you're at, but then like, did you go to the kids, and did you go to your life, and all of that kind of stuff, or was it just present moment?
Oh yeah. So it definitely starts with like all these emotions come up, and I am fried. I am just cooked on how like already emotionally drained I am in this scenario. And then I start to think I'm catastrophizing. Like if I was a terrorist, this is the place I would attack right now, right? It would be it would be worse than all other attacks in the U.S. and the world combined, right? If you did something like that, which would be absolutely fucking horrendous. And then I'm like, what about my kids? Right? Like, or like, what if something did happen? What if there was an incident with a shooter or something like that? Like, I'm 15 minutes from the entrance of this place, right? Where there's everybody around us. We are like, when you walk out, we're 20 rows down. Jamie had found some really good seats for us. So we're like row 14, right? And I'm like, cool, there are 30 rows above us that are all trying to go through that same little corridor, right? There's no way that this is all going to work out for us and be good. And I'm like, all right, if something were to happen, if I dive this way, I could cover her and maybe we can drop. And I'm like, so I'm going through all this and I have all this now anxiety and fear, and I'm like, I'm never going to see my kids again. And I'm like, oh my God.
And then this motherfucker's up on stage singing about,
oh yeah.
Past,
yeah. And I'm just like, and I'm like, this is too much. I'm so far. I'm so gone. Yeah, it was terrible. And I give for anybody who's listening, especially if you deal with any of this kind of stuff, is like, I give Jamie so much credit, and she has done such a great job of, I don't want to say like not dealing with, but helping me.
Yeah, supporting you.
Supporting me, yeah. And just, hey, it's going to be okay, right? She knows that she's not going to say anything in the moment that's going to make me like it's going to be okay. Like, yeah, that is a pebble of sand or a grain of sand in this beach of emotion that I have right now, but I appreciate it, right? But she was just there and she was like, I'm so sorry that we're here. And I'm like, it's all right. Like, we've got to get through this, right? Otherwise I can't go watch a football game, which would be really sad for me.
Well, it's my whole thing of like, if it's on your path, it's for your path, right?
Yeah. So
for whatever reason, you're sitting in that stadium fucking having to eat that shit sandwich and deal with all that stuff right there in that moment for whatever reason,
That's actually a solid, like, I agree, right? Like nothing, I am a person that believes that everything happens kind of for a reason, right? And I think that it definitely, I needed that experience so I could prepare, which allowed me to be probably better prepared for when I do take my son to his first NFL football game. And so now my son doesn't have to sit there and watch like, why is dad freaking out, And I can now like really prepare myself even more for that experience with him, with somebody who isn't my wife.
Like I feel like there's two issues, and I mean, obviously that's an understatement, right? You probably got 40 issues, but I feel like there's two issues there where you've got the anxiety of crowds and being in, those type of environments. And then I feel like you've also got the repressed emotion underneath everything, right?
Yeah.
The cascade of emotion that needs to be felt, processed, and just allowed to be moved through your body.
Yeah.
So in your mind, what are things that you want to do to, it's one thing to kind of like immersion therapy and put yourself into crowds and into uncomfortable positions, but then what about the emotions? What about the stuff that's underneath that? Because to me, it seems like there's kind of two 2 points there.
I don't want to talk about this. No,
No, that's the whole thing, right? It's like, yes, there's 2 things, and fuck off, we're moving on.
Yeah. So thanks, Craig. No, it definitely helps. I mean, I've been out of the Marine Corps 10 years now. I mean, actually, yesterday was my 10 years of I was first Civ Div, right? First Division civilians, since I got out. And
you were in for like 12 years or
10
something?
years.
10 years.
Yeah. And just under, yeah. And so I definitely need to continue to work on some of that stuff. And I've gone to therapy and counseling and stuff like that on and off over the years. My last psychiatrist died, and nobody told me. Oh, super cool guy. He was in Vietnam. So we instantly kind of like, he's like, yep. He's like, hey, I'm a Vietnam vet. He's like, I'm not a combat vet. He's like, but I did serve. I was a chaplain overseas. He's like, and that, brought me into this. And I was like, okay. And super cool guy to talk with. We had probably 15 sessions. And then I had to like reschedule a session. And then I don't think we got, like, I missed that one or something. And then it had been like 3 or 4 weeks and I hadn't heard anything. And then after like a month, I was like, hey, I called and the VA is like, oh yeah, we're not really sure what's going on. So I had to find his because he was a volunteer. I had to find his practice. And I finally got a hold of somebody and they're like, oh yeah, he died. And I was like, oh,
that sucks.
Right. And I was like, all right, well, I don't want to kill another therapist, so let's just won't do that again. But it definitely helped. Like I've got to.
Was that the last time that?
It was the last time I was in therapy.
And how long ago was that?
It was like, I want to say like 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. And we were talking, every 2 weeks or so like that, and it was good. Just kind of going through, checking in. I think it's good. It's everybody does things a little differently, right? Like checking in. Well, how does that affect you? And the more like the Freud, like, and how does that make you feel? And then there's more just like the checking in. Hey, how's it going? Like, what's going on? This and that. And I think you've got to find the right person to work with you,
for sure.
Right? I know that's I was just talking to somebody about that, and it's hard to find somebody that you can talk with. And I think I actually gave the advice, like, well, just start trying, right? And I'm over here like, I'm not going to try anything.
I know. Yeah. I mean, it's super hard to find the therapist or the counselor or somebody that you really resonate with and you can feel safe with.
Yeah.
And it usually takes, and everybody's different, of course, but I mean, for me, it would take me 3-4 sessions of being in that space before I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to open up a little bit to this guy. But then it's just an incremental little bit.
Totally.
A little bit here, a little bit there. And then finally, my last therapist that I had, it was when we were back in Utah, and I worked with him for, I don't know, 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. And I was so resistant in the beginning. And it took a long time before I was able to finally just let everything go and kind of be in that space. And then it sucks because when we moved, it was like I had my last session with him, and it was the same thing where it was like, well, maybe we'll be able to, because a lot of our sessions, were on Zoom anyways. We did in-person stuff too, and he did a really good job of our final session acknowledging the relationship that him and I had created together, and like, kind of approached it from that perspective. And I thought I was really grateful for that, because it was giving closure to that experience and to that relationship, and to, he looked at it very much, it wasn't just like this check in a box thing for him. He was very much involved in my life and in what was happening with me. And do you know what I mean? In a healthy way. Yeah. He had very, very good boundaries, but
he wasn't watching you sleep, but
Yeah. No. But it's so challenging and so hard to find somebody. And I also think that we make it harder because we don't try.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I don't think when I say it's, it's challenging to find somebody, yes, that's the case, but we also make it way harder than it needs to be.
Yeah.
The truth is, at least for me, I'm still so resistant to opening up to people and sharing vulnerable parts of myself, especially the stuff that I don't want to talk about or that I don't want to feel,
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, and I feel like there's a lot of things that you can do to help, right? I mean, jiu-jitsu has probably been one of the best things for me as an outlet, right? To get in there, other guys, there's other veterans, like these guys that I can feel kind of like it's a safe environment for me, right? People that I have shared experiences with, people that I connect with. So I think that is super helpful. I think that obviously having a super supportive partner can be very helpful, but I think that all of those things can also be enabling. I don't know if that's the right word, where they kind of like, oh, well, I'm doing it's okay.
That's what I do all the time.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, I'm checking all the boxes of healthy things that I'm doing for myself. And then it comes to like, what about your emotions? Well,
we don't talk about those.
I go to jiu-jitsu.
You're like, you already said that.
Get a lot of anger out.
Yeah. You're like, well,
what's underneath the anger? I don't know.
Yeah. We don't have to actually,
Yeah, I think we got to do better. I think not just you and me, but I think men in general, because I believe it's when we look at like the current state of the world, and we're not going to go off on some big like tangent about the patriarchy and issues and all these kind of different things, but a lot of problems that I see, at least from the perspective, and it's not just issues with men and, that men have.
Yeah.
It's overall people in general struggle so much with emotional health. And I think that that's an area where everybody needs to focus way, way more, and society as a whole needs to focus on it way, way more, because I look at it now as just emotional maturity and being able to experience and process and feel the wide range of emotions that we get to feel as humans. And that's really important to me because I have enough experience in life to recognize what happens when I don't feel and process and allow those emotions to be kind of moved through my body. I can see what happens when that doesn't occur. I can see what it does to me. I can see what it does to the people around me. And it's not good. Like it has, a lot of my issues over the course of my life, a lot of issues with myself. I know that we've talked about, it's hard to remember everything that we've talked about, and we've only recorded a handful of episodes, but I think we talked about self-harm, just all sorts of different stuff.
Yeah.
All of those things that I've experienced over the course of my life, I can chalk a lot of them up to just not being able to feel, express, and really more and more and more, it's just how do I move these emotions through my body? How do I process these emotions? How do I just simply allow them to be felt?
Yep.
Like when you were talking about being at the concert and, like your body's shaking and you've got tears and it's like, what's going on? What are you feeling? What's wrong? You're like, I don't know. Just shit's happening inside of my body.
Yep.
That to me is a really crucial part of just being able to have your physical body feel and process your emotions. And it's so hard. Like no matter how many times I do it, there's for me, breathwork has been a huge,
like box breathing or just like,
no, like those full on 30-minute breathwork sessions.
Okay.
Right. Where you're laying there breathing consistently and repeatedly, and it's building into that, big release at the end of that session. That to me has been really, really powerful and helpful because I don't have to do a lot of thinking or processing. So I'm not sitting there trying to analyze the emotion or, I might get flashes of experiences or memories that start to come up, but it's just keep breathing, motherfucker. Just keep breathing. Just keep breathing. So I have a singular, like I can focus on one thing. I just have to focus on my breath. And in doing so, then my body gets to just kind of freak the fuck out and move and do all sorts of different things. And when I do them, there's a guy that I really like. His name's Josh Conley. And I'm hoping to have him on the podcast at some point because he's a super cool guy. And he leads breath work and does all this other kind of work and stuff. But I'm alone. I don't like to do them with people. I like to do them by myself. And I'm laying there on the ground, and 5 minutes into it, like my body's moving. I start wiggling. I'm shaking out stuff. My legs. I can't stay still. But that's part of it. Like that's the goal isn't to just lay there perfectly and breathe for 25 minutes straight. Your body is adjusting and moving, and then eventually I'm starting to like it's funny because it's anyways, I was starting to describe something, and it's weird. It looks weird, I'm sure, from the outside, and it
Somebody's like, is Craig possessed?
Right?
Yeah,
and it probably doesn't look that strange, but in my mind it does. And so I'm writhing on the ground and moving, all while I'm continuing to breathe. And then undoubtedly, eventually, it's tears are rolling down my face. And at least the style of breath work that guy leads, the end final round of it is a yell and a scream, this big emotional release. And that has been, all the different things that I've tried with somatic stuff, that has been really impactful for me and really powerful for me to just move emotion through my body. Yeah. And it's interesting because it feels then like I have space in my body. Like it's this weird feeling where suddenly I feel lighter. I feel like I just literally have more space, more flexibility, more movement, more connection with my body because shit that was stored in there is gone. And all I had to do was fill it. I don't know. That's what's worked a lot for me lately, at least.
I mean, I've done some breathing work with you where you've like walked us through, and I've done some other stuff where it's more like the performance-based breathing work and stuff like that. Like, I can never remember his name. It's like Brian something, who's all into like box breathing and stuff like that. I've done some of that. I think it's super good to go through all that. I think you have to be consistent with it, right? Because the first time you do it, you're just like sitting there and you're kind of like, so I'm just, you're breathing and you're like, this is silly. Yeah. And you have to like kind of let your body get used to that. I think so. It takes a couple of times, and it's definitely something that I want to try more of. I think I was doing this. I did 75 hard, right? And I did the second stage, phase 2 or phase whatever, where there's like 10 minutes of like meditation, and I can't just sit there. So I was doing 10 minutes of like guided meditation, just some YouTube like video, whatever, and just like walking you through whatever. And I would say by the second week of that, I mean, just 10 minutes, but the second week of that, I was getting up from it. I would just sit in a chair, put my phone down, let that play. And by the second week, I felt better. Yeah. Every time I was like, yeah, right. I was feeling better from listening, breathing, and doing all that. And then I stopped. Yeah. Because I was like, well, this is really terrible.
Yeah, it's the same old thing where we go back to our routines and we go back to what's normal, right? Because
what's comfortable.
Yeah. So what kind of daily, and maybe I don't know if you even have daily practices, what kind of daily practices do you have outside of, like, this is the thing that I think is really important as well for men. And yes, it's great to be focused on physical health and making sure that we're fit, healthy, strong, all those kind of things I think are super important, super critical, but they're just one component, I believe, to like an overall picture of health. Yep. And so what else are you doing on a daily basis outside of just focusing on physical health?
To be honest, one of the things that I am really trying to be very cognizant about is I'm trying to be a better friend. Okay. So I am not great at that stuff. So like I send like, hey, how's your day going? Yeah. Checking in with you. That's really what I'm pushing myself for right now is like, hey, I haven't talked to Craig today. Let me just send him a quick text message, see how he's doing. Right. And so I'm working on that.
That's huge.
I'm trying.
Yeah. I think that's a really big deal.
Yeah. I'm doing that. And I'm not great at it yet. I'm trying to...
Hey, real quick, if you're just somebody that listens to podcasts, thank you. But if you want to watch us week after week, jump over to our YouTube channel. Just search out bravemendare. Click that subscribe button. Don't forget the little notification bell, and come see what we're all about week after week on the podcast. We share tons of content there as well, and we even have some plans in the future to do some live episodes. So come subscribe to us on YouTube, and while you're at it, you might as well follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok as well. We hope you're enjoying this episode, and let's get back to it.
Get to a point where I'm comfortable in doing nothing but like sitting there and just hanging out with my kids.
Yeah.
Right. We're not like, I don't want to call it like intentional play, but definitely just like yesterday, my daughter came over and I was like, come here, you want to like watch some jujitsu videos with me real quick? And she was like, yeah. So she came, sat on my lap, and we just sat in a chair and watched some jujitsu YouTube videos for a minute. And like, that was it, right? Just trying to be like, hey, we're just going to hang out here for a minute. Right. Trying to be very intent on some of that stuff. And I just heard this, and I actually don't even remember what it was, but it was somebody, I saw it on like LinkedIn or something, and it was like, as a leader, the things that you say echo and are amplified, right? And I have a tendency, for anybody that works with me, right? Like I'm a squeaky wheel, right? There is no doubt that you are getting my opinion on this, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty open. I'm very open to feedback, right? As long as it's in a constructive, like, hey, like I had somebody tell me, she's like, well, you know, you're not a real VP. And I was like, all right, bitch.
I'm open to feedback as long as it's stuff I want to hear.
Yeah.
It's stuff I don't want to hear. Then I'm not really open to.
If you're just trying to be mean and hurt my feelings, and you can pound sand.
Yeah.
But if you're like, hey, you said you went this way about it, I would maybe look at it this way, which is great. And I'm trying to absorb how everybody else is doing things, but I'm really trying to think about how I say things, especially to like my team at work. And I'm trying to be better about like, don't say those things, right? Let's be more constructive and positive, right, in what we're doing, not just like, yeah, these guys keep fucking everything up.
What's the reason underneath that? Like, why are you trying to be so cognitive about your words and how you're speaking?
I definitely think that, like, I want to be a better leader. I'm always trying to be a better leader of my family, of my team members at work, you know, within my close-knit group of friends. But I want to make sure that if I'm like, the whole idea of like, because I do tend to just go off the cuff, right? And I just start not even rambling, but just, I don't know if everybody could understand. Like, if you ever watch the movie Full Metal Jacket, when he's like, they're in boot camp and they're just, and the DI is just going, almost any Marine can basically do the exact same thing, right? Like, we used to look at like, holy shit, like it just started going off. But I've totally done that to like my son. I've done that to like, what are you doing? You know, and nobody likes that, right? There's a reason why you do it in boot camp, right? You have to break all these things down so everybody's on the same page so we can build back up from that. I don't need to do that to, you know, Brett, the 34-year-old account executive who, you know, or whatever. Like, I don't need to do that to Brett.
Right.
You know, I don't need to have these conversations and talk down to or whatever. And I think that a lot of those things leave lasting impressions. So I'm always trying to make sure that I am leaving the right impression. You know, it's my dad used to say this to me, and it's maybe one of the few things that I still like pick up from what he said, and it's what Thumper said. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, from Bambi, right? And he used to say that to me all the time, and I was like, that's stupid. And now I've totally looked at my son like, listen, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. But I think that's important, right? Because I want to curate how the world sees me, right? And what impressions I leave on people. But I also want to make sure that I'm not putting anything, I don't want my mouth to write a check on something that somebody else's ass has to cash.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to talk down to somebody and they like walk away and go like, man, this guy fucking hates me. Like, I don't want to do that to anybody. And I think it's harder in like today's society and everything like that for the guys that I served with and all that. Like I never thought twice about like, I'm just going to jump down your throat for a minute. And then like 2 weeks later, be like, let's go get some beers. Right. Just to screw with their minds. But I don't know, always trying to be a better person. I think that there's a lot of room for growth.
Yeah.
And,
we all have a lot of room, dude.
Yeah.
I think about it all the time where it's like, it's funny because you brought up Joe. I was talking to Joe last night at jiu-jitsu. And I'm on this perpetual journey of trying to become the best version of myself. And we were talking about mortality because he just, I guess I won't shout out how old he is, but we were talking about.
He's really old.
He, the whole idea of, just confronting and facing mortality. And there's one part of it I feel like where I've made peace with death and, I'm not avoiding, I'm not afraid, I'm not, those things I don't necessarily feel like are super prevalent for me in my life, but I'm also not ready to.
Yeah.
And it feels like this whole thing where I'm in the process of working on bettering myself and becoming a better version of myself, every day, every week, every month, every year. And I haven't seen the best version of myself yet. And I'm excited to. And I know that it's like, I'll never see the best version of myself. It's this, we talk a lot, Steph and I talk a lot about healing, and it's like, it's not an end goal. It's just this perpetual thing that will just keep going. And I feel the same way about this kind of thing where I'll never see, Craig at the peak of Craig. And if I just keep waiting for that and looking for that, that's not a life that I want to live, right? Eventually at some point. And that's something that I've been working on more and more, is just being really content with where I'm at and really okay with where I'm at, and recognizing like, even if I would have gone back 5 years ago and said, hey, in 5 years, this is what your life's going to look like, I'd be like, are you serious? Like, that's what my life looks like now? I'm so like, that's amazing. I'm so happy. I'm so grateful for that, right? So trying to be really cognitive of where I'm at and how life is unfolding and shaping on a regular basis, and yet still striving to become a better version of myself, better physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, all of these things, just trying to get to the spot where I feel like I don't even know what the end goal is. And there isn't an end goal. I have to constantly remind myself of that. But it's definitely this journey where I want to see I want to see what Craig can do. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like the parts that I've been able to heal, I feel like have given me a lot of momentum and a lot of growth. And so I'm excited for the future because I feel like I'm going to be getting to some pretty good era, like the era of Craig that's coming up. I'm pretty fucking excited for. Yeah. Because I've been able to do a lot of work and life's getting a lot easier. And that's the part that I find really fascinating, is it's like life doesn't have to be as hard as, I have made it my whole life. Things don't have to be as difficult. I don't have to carry as much stress and worry. And I mean, for example, the whole thing of like going into a crowded place and being cognitive of exits and all of these different what if scenarios. And that was such a weight that I carried for so long. And I love not fucking having it anymore. I just don't carry it in the forefront. It will peak up and, it will creep up and it will be there sometimes and I'll have to pay attention to it. But by and large, it's not something that I worry about. I don't think about those things. I don't think about, what could happen in certain circumstances. And I find that when I do start going in those directions of thought, because I did it recently with all the travel that I had and flying and, all these kind of different things, my brain starts to go to those places, and I just recognize in those moments, it's less about, oh, this is something that I need to be doing, and more about, what does this mean about my nervous system? Yeah. I'm really taxed. I'm really tired. I'm going to fear. I'm going to anxiety. probably as a way to get adrenaline in order to push me further, because I'm tired and I'm slowing, like I'm worn out. My nervous system, my physical body is strained and worn out. So I'm going to these things in order to spark adrenaline and the different chemicals in my body so that I can continue to go and push harder to get through the experience. I'm like, I don't need to do that.
You don't need the dopamine?
Yeah, I don't need the dopamine. I don't need the adrenaline, right? I can actually rest. I can be fucking tired. I can allow myself the break rather than feeling like I got to keep going. I got to keep going. I got to keep going. I don't have to keep going. Like it's okay to rest. It's okay to just be, like you said, right? You get 2 weeks of meditation. You're like, oh, this is kind of nice.
Yeah.
There's actually something to this.
Yeah. I just want to say that I think the best version of Craig, who is yet to come, involves face tattoos. I think that face tattoos are the best version of Craig.
Right? I could see that. I could see that.
Yeah. It's always the goal of like, so I had this idea that I don't have fully fleshed out yet. And it's the idea of like, so I really don't, when I had my gym, we had just in these giant, like 20-inch tall letters across the ceiling, progress, not perfection, right? I'm a big fan of, you got a spider on you or something?
No, I got
Charlotte's Web.
Fucking strands of hair everywhere. So.
I don't have that problem. But it's so I'm a huge fan, right? Like, is it James Clear? Atomic Habits, like 1% better, right? Always improvement, just constant improvement. We're always growing, just all these things. I'm a huge fan of all that stuff. And the idea I've really been thinking about the idea of perfection, right? What is perfection? Perfection is, it's perfect, right? Which means there's no room for improvement, which means there's a ceiling. So if this is perfect, that means that you can never get past that. And that means that I have said this is as good as it's going to get. But I can only say that based on the knowledge and experience that I have. So if I think to myself that my yard is perfect, right, because I've done everything I can, somebody else might know more than me, and they're like, no, this is perfect. Well, then there's someone who knows more than them, right? So when we say that we're working on, I want to be perfect at this, right? It means that there's no room for there's never room for growth past that point. And I don't believe in that, right? I believe that you can always be better at something. Mm-hmm. You can always make things better. We're always working on improvements. And I think that we're always like, I don't want to say everybody. I think as maybe a foundational idea of being a good man, being a brave man, is to constantly try to self-improve, right? And we want to be better partners, better parents. We want to be better members of our community, and we always want to work towards those things. So I think that you'll never get to the perfect, the
best version.
The best version. The only downside would be is if you were like 10 years ago, Craig, like that guy was fucking awesome, right? Like if I ever think to myself, like, dude, I was so much better, right? You're like, what am I doing? But we always just want to push and continue to grow. And I think that's a big part of today's society, especially like for men. Like, what are we working on? What are we doing? Are you just sitting there?
See, I completely agree. I think it's I agree with everything that you're saying. I think it's a big part of whether we want to say sometimes I think, yes, there's so many things that are uniquely masculine in nature and that are part of being a man and living as a man and a lived experience of, all of that stuff. But I think, truth be told, the vast majority of stuff is just humans. Mm-hmm. And, women experience very similar things and just nuanced different ways and everything like that. And so I agree completely that the drive to better yourself is an important part of being a human. But I also think that, I don't think perfection exists. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's something that should even be strived for. Yeah. Because I think just simply, doesn't exist. And I also think that the thing of like always having to be doing something to better yourself, always having to be improving, always having that, I think is also I think it's a lie. I think it's a trap.
Like a fallacy.
I think that it's something that, it might be some evolutionary thing where had people not done that, right? Had people not gone over the other side of the hill to see what's over there, had man not pushed out into the darkness and trying to do things, then obviously we wouldn't be here. So I think that that's probably a component of where it comes from. But I also think it's incredibly important to not do those things. It's incredibly important to be present with where you're at, and not just from the perspective of like, okay, I'm checking a box and I'm relaxing, I'm meditating, or I'm taking time to, spend conscious time with my children. All of those things are healthy and beneficial and important, but rather than from the perspective of like, oh, I'm checking a box and I'm doing these steps in order to, again, move the ball forward in regards to me becoming a better version of myself. Just doing those things for the sake of doing them, just being present in the moment for the sake of being present in the moment, and not because I have to slow down, not because I have to rest, but truthfully from the perspective of like, that's an important part of life. Like I watched, goddamn, it was Chimp. I can't remember if it was Chimp Nation or Chimp, the documentary with the chimps.
Yeah. I think it's right? Chimp Nation. Yeah.
Yeah. Where so
where you
much
find out that they're just vicious. Yeah.
Right. But a lot of their time is also laying around doing nothing. Right. And I like that. I like laying around doing nothing.
Yeah.
And being able to do that without the guilt of I should be doing something more, or I'm not doing anything to better myself, or, I've wasted the last, if you just are lazy all weekend long, then you're lazy all weekend long. You didn't do anything. Instead of being like, oh no, I did a bunch of stuff. It just involved me doing nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important thing too, that I think people in general, but also men, like it's hard. It's really hard for me to do nothing. It's really hard for me to not be productive. And I have to find the healthy balance in that space. And that itself is a struggle.
Yeah.
Like being able to find the balance between, yes, being productive, yes, wanting to improve myself, all of those kind of things that I think are really critical and are important to me, have to be balanced with being totally okay with how things are, and not just being okay with them. Because I think sometimes I will justify how, like, my life isn't what I want it to be today. And I'll justify that to myself with excuses of why it's not, in order to make myself feel okay about why it's not.
Yeah.
And what I want to do better at is not seeing my life through that lens, and rather than that, just being very comfortable and okay regardless. Right? Because I do think that it's just kind of a big dumb fucking game.
Yeah.
It's just this silliness of life.
Yeah.
Like, truth be told, we're all dead. We're all dying.
Yep.
We're all on the same path towards death.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, I don't think I'm going to be really worried about how productive I was, how successful I was. I'm going to be really focused on the relationships that I had, and how much time I got to spend with the people that I love. Those are the things that I think are important, but I could be wrong.
I think what the big thing that you hit on there is you have to be, it's got to be a balance, right? As much as I love just sitting on the TV, sitting on the couch, watching TV, doing nothing, or even just doing nothing, right? Like not even watching, just doing nothing. That's great, right? If your roof is leaking and you've got like all these other things are going on, your kids are hungry, that may not be the time, right? I think you've got to find, like, everybody's got to find when's the time to, like, hey, really, like, knuckle down and get some shit done, versus I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to just be myself in this, like, resting, like regenerative kind of like state. I think it's totally a balance and everything, right? It was 2 weeks ago, I took the week off, right? And my plan had been to like, I'm going to get all this stuff done. And then I think on Monday, I was like, all right, I worked for like maybe 2 hours. I did a couple things around the house. And then I'm dealing with, at the same time, like my dog has got a big case of the Tretidize.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, all right, so I really never got to the point where I could like fully relax. I think out of an entire week, I might have done nothing really for like 2 days. But at the same time, I used that time to catch up on some other things that I was missing that I am happy that got done, right? So I think it is a good balance in trying to find like, yeah, you don't have to be there 24 usable hours in every day. There are 24 usable hours in every day, but you have to decide you can't do that every day, because the next thing you know, you've gone, 128 hours without sleeping, and then you crash, right? And then you're worthless and not worthless.
Yeah.
Yeah, worthless.
Worthless.
Yeah, worthless. Yeah.
Sleep is super critical.
Super important for your whole body. I don't know if you know this, it's a big deal. Not recommending not sleeping. But as somebody who doesn't sleep, but I think that you have to, there's got to be a time to go and a time to not go, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, and I joke about this in jujitsu, right? And they're like, somebody will be like, you just laying there. I was like, yeah, I'm conserving energy. I was like, I'm totally fine to be on my back while someone else is on top trying to do things. I'm just going to lay here. Mm-hmm. Somebody's like, you close your eyes. I was like, yeah, I'm just resting. Like, continue to do what it is that you want to do. I'm going to rest right now because of conservation. I don't know if you know, this is not. It takes effort to move my body around in time and space. Like, I'm going to use some of this force here in a moment. I'm just not using it right now. So I think it's a balance. You can't go, if you sit on the couch for months on end, like that's not healthy either, right? Yeah. I think it's good to have moments in time where you can just do nothing, but I think it's super important to also be active and conscious and intent, or have intention in what it is that you're doing.
Because I think we go through patterns as well. I don't think that everything is always, because the question I'm going to ask you is like, where are you struggling when it comes to balance in your life? And rather than so specific, I think that what is your common patterns when it comes to that? Because I think, like right now, I feel like when it comes to balance, I'm doing a pretty good job. I would say for the most part, I do a relatively good job of balancing things to where I'm kind of taking care of all of my different needs. The areas of struggle for me when it comes to balance are definitely work. I will definitely work too much. Mm-hmm. I will focus too hard on just keeping my head down and doing work. And then when I say extracurricular activities, it's not just like the hobbies that I like to do and the things that I like to do, but it's the time away from just work.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever that might be. That's a big struggle for me a lot. So stuff like that, like what are some common patterns that you find yourself falling into when it comes to that whole game of how do I balance all of these things in order to be a healthy man in life?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, so before I go into I think something that I see a lot of, a good friend of mine, Matt Verlack, a guy who used to be my boss, just talked about this, and he was talking about work-life balance. And he doesn't like the idea of a work-life balance because there's balance in my day, there's balance in my week, there's balance in my month. There's balance in this year. There's balance in this decade, right? Like, I'm going to work more now than I will between, my 40 to 50 decade is going to have more work in it than my 60 to 70 decade. Right. So I've got to understand that the balance, there's this infinite small scale of balance where it's like, yes, in this hour, I'm only going to work. So there's a lot of there's no balance in this hour. But I know over the course of these 8, or we'll call it 12 hours, right? Over the course of these 12 hours, I'm going to work for 8 of them and not for 4. So we're trying to find balance. And then if I expand that out from like the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep, I am, if I wake up at 5, I wake up normally about 4:30. If I wake up at 4:30, I tend to sometimes look at my email or LinkedIn or whatever, right? But I don't actually really start working till like 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, right? And that's just based on, and then I'll work till 5, 6, 7 o'clock sometimes. And then I'm into jujitsu and kids or whatever that is, right? And then we have all that. So there's always this like up and down thing. My tendencies are to work, right? And I think everybody's different in this. I tend to think about my professional life didn't start until I was 35.
Okay.
Right? Like I got out of high school and I've always had a job. I've had a job since I was like 13 or something like that, always working. But I was in school and then a little bit of college and then I was in the Marine Corps, right? And then I got out. I was about to have a family. I opened a business, like just 90-hour weeks and all that stuff. And then I didn't get an actual like job in what I consider a job until I was like 35. And I've been like, all right, well, I'm starting maybe a hair later than most. So I've got to work a little harder to ramp into that, right? So I've really probably for the last 5, 6, since like 2019, really been going hard into work stuff. Because I had some time, like, I was working when I had the gym, but that was maybe not what some people can call a job. And then now I'm like, all right, cool. I really want to do this. At the same time, I can put that into the comparison of like, I want to work really hard so that when I can try to bring my kids into different experiences that I didn't get an opportunity for, not because it never worked out for my parents to take me to Disney World, right? I can't wait to take my kids to Disney World. My parents, the international travel that I did with my family was we went to Canada, right? And it was because we had family there, and like that's what we did. But I am excited to one day hopefully take my kids on an international trip. I think that would be super fun for them to experience some of that. And all I think about is like National Lampoon's Trip to Europe or something like that. I'll totally be Griswold.
Right.
But so I'm working hard now for those things so that I can do those other things later in life. So I think that's kind of where I try to look at balance. I also know that I can't just work. So I tend to like wake up, do our workouts and stuff like that for me, for my health and all that. We do breakfast time. We get like one of the things that I think that we do as a family is my wife and I, 98% of the time we drive our kids to school, right? It's a 3-mile drive. It's not far or anything like that, but we intentionally just go together. It doesn't need to, but we do because we want to spend time together and we joke, we quiz, but we're spending time together. We go do that. And then like we go do things at night together. We do jujitsu, like both my kids and, we all do jujitsu. So trying to find some of that balance, I think Jason Kalipa, he has a really cool, I think, idea on this. He's got a book called AMRAP Mentality. So it's as many reps as possible. It's a thing from CrossFit. And you would say, hey, in this 10-minute time frame, do as much of that as you can. So his whole theory is like he has an AMRAP mentality on everything that he does. He's like, I'm going to do emails for the next 30 minutes. I'm going to AMRAP emails. And he just sits there. He does nothing else. He's not on social media. He's not on his phone. He's just doing emails for 30 minutes. And he's like, cool. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go do family time AMRAP. I'm going to do as much intentional family time as I'm not working during this time. So he's not bouncing back and forth between all these things. He's very intentional in what he's doing for that time frame. And I think that there's some really cool ideas in how all that works, right? With his training and his work and all that stuff. And I'm like, yeah. And then when you watch like what this guy can do in a day, because he's like, yeah, I worked for, he did a hardcore hours worth of podcast, meeting, this, and he did all that work in an hour. And then he went to the range and he trained and he shot for another hour. And then he went to lunch with his wife, stuff like that. Like, when you look at it, you're like, yeah, dude, this guy got a ton done. He's killing it, right, in all the things that he's doing from the outside looking in. Right. I don't know what that looks like behind the curtains, but he's constantly going. And I feel like he's balancing those nuanced times, right? Like, yes, I'm going to do all these things for these 4 hours, but then I'm going to do these things for these 4 hours to find that balance.
Yeah, I still struggle with the productivity of like, got to do more, always got to be doing stuff, always got to be grinding. I feel like I do feel like it's this bill of goods that we were all been sold, that leads to success, that leads to happiness, that leads to whatever it is, right? Work hard now, play hard later, like all of that stuff. I just don't feel like it's ever served me. I feel like my goal in life right now is to work the least amount that I possibly can, and instead just create a life where I get to do and be and experience whatever it is that I want to kind of do and be and experience. And I'm like, I think about, because the whole mentality too of like, you're going to do 20 years at some job and then you're going to retire and then you're going to go and live this life where you get to do all these things that you finally want to be able to do. I don't want to wait 20 years to do that. I don't want to spend, any amount of time doing shit that I don't want to be doing. To me, I feel like time is precious no matter what you're doing. And so if I'm doing what I would classify as work, it's definitely got to be something that I enjoy. It's got to be something that I am comfortable doing, that I enjoy doing. And then I want to do it. When I say the least amount of possible, I don't know. I just feel like the grinding and pushing mentality, I think, has its place in history almost. Like it was important during a certain time period in the evolution of man or whatever the case may be. But I really think that in the long-term scheme of things, like it's what I was saying earlier, that stuff's not important. You know what I mean? Like when I'm finally on my deathbed or when I look back over the course of my life, I'm not going to be thinking about those things. I'm not going to be but this is just me, of course, right? Everybody gets to make their own decisions and feel how they feel and stuff like that. But
and I think that's like I don't think there's a wrong way, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at it like from the people, I just saw this little clip and it was, I can't remember his name now. He was the CEO of Starbucks, right? And he was testifying in front of like Congress or something like that. And they're like, you're a billionaire and you were in charge of all these people and all this stuff. And he's like, yeah. And the person who was questioning him was like, you're a billionaire, right? And he's like, let's get something straight. I grew up in government housing. He's like, I have everything I have because I've worked my ass off for the last 60 years. That's his path, right? If you look at somebody who lives on Skid Row and you're like, hey, just put that down, put that needle down and come over here and you can have a fresh bath and we'll get you clean clothes and we'll do your hair and we'll find you a job and you can get on this path. And they're like, that's not, I want the needle, right? That's their path. So I don't think it's not on me or you or TikTok to tell us what is the path. That's the path that I'm taking. And I don't think there's a right path or a wrong path in this. There's paths that we don't agree with, right? I can't think of a path the needle path. I'm not a big fan of I'm just going to live on the streets but that's me, right? I don't think that's a good path. But at the same time, like what would be a bad path, right? Like this person somebody who lives in their van parked on, US 1 in California.
By the river,
right? Down by the river. like, if they're content as hell and happy as shit, like, get it. Like, I'm stoked for you.
Yeah.
If you can wake up and go to bed knowing that you're living your best life, good on you. Get it, right? I'm a bigger person. I can't live in a van, right? Like, I'm super, my boss, we were talking about campers, right? And he's like, oh yeah. He bought like the Sprinter van conversion. And he's like, this thing's so cool. And I'm like, there's no room in that thing. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, well, your family is a smaller family. You're like, I can understand where you guys are okay with that. My family's not a smaller family. And we have the same number of people, but like, they're smaller people. And I was like, that doesn't work for me. So everybody's got their different things in it, right? But I think that I don't think that there's a good path or bad path. I definitely agree with the idea of like, however many years from now on my deathbed, like, I don't want to look back and be like, I wish I had spent more here or there, or I bet nobody looks back and like, I wish I worked harder.
Probably somebody does.
There's probably somebody.
Right?
Yeah.
Who knows?
I really wish I would have put in 15-hour days
Right.
as opposed to 12. Did. But
They should have got that promotion.
should have But I think, everybody, who am I to say what somebody's happiness is? Who am I to say what somebody's hustle is or their efforts? Somebody might look at somebody who does a podcast and be like, what are you doing with your life, right? And somebody might look at somebody who sits in an office cubicle all day and they're like, what are you doing with your life? People who surf, like, what are you doing? Like, there are sharks in the ocean. Stay out of the ocean. I don't understand, right? Sherpas that work on Everest, right? They get terrible pay. They die on the regular, right? Like, there are over 100 corpses on Everest that they use them now as waypoints. And somebody's like, yeah, this is what I do for a living. You're like, that's insane.
Yeah.
For me, that's their way of living, and who am I to judge on that?
There's a really good chance, too, that it's just all a simulation.
A simulation.
There's a really good chance that all of this shit is just a video game.
Yeah.
And, it's a really good video game.
Right.
Like, this is some of the best VR that we've ever seen before.
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, sometimes I think that all of these, like the angst, a lot of this stuff feels like teenage angst for me. Do you remember being a teenager and trying to figure out what you were going to do with your life, and when was life going to begin? When am I going to be an adult? How am I going to do these things? It's just like this.
Always waiting.
Yeah, this angst of what is and what's going to be, and how do I get to, from point A to point B, and it's like waiting for your life to begin. Like, part of me feels like this is a similar energy, at least for me, where it's like I'm waiting for, the next thing, or I'm waiting to get to this next spot. I'm waiting for this, finally some semblance of I've arrived, life has, I've accomplished life. I'm an adult, all of these kind of markers that society throws out there. And I look at that and I think, I don't want to live, another 10 years. I don't want to spend any more time in this space of trying to accomplish these things that I don't really think fucking matter.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, how can I be more present again with the things that I find are really, really important? I don't know, dude. I feel like we've peeled this onion back as far because there's so much about it that I think society's doing it wrong. I think by and large, like you said, there's no right or wrong path, but I think the idea that we all need to be more productive.
Yeah.
And that there's this big push, and especially with masculinity and with men, and do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like it's way far over on this other end of the spectrum where it's not healthy anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree that we have really, as a society, pushed into the keeping up with the Joneses and all that stuff, right? I think like there's and I'm guilty of it, right? Like if I drive by a new F-350, I'm like, right? Like I can't stop myself. I want one. I can't wait for the day when I get to have one. And at the same time, I drive a 10-year-old truck, right? And I have been for 8 years now, and I'm like, whatever. One day, right? But I think that there's a lot of little things, like the whole, I don't remember. I want to think this is from the movie Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man. Have you ever seen that movie? I love that movie.
Right. We got Mickey Rourke, and is it Woody? It's Mickey Rourke. And
no, it's not Woody.
Guy?
It's Don Johnson.
That's right.
Don Johnson. Right. And, but his, I think it's from that movie. He's like, hey man, you got to get busy living or get busy dying. And I think that's if you're in the situation where you're like, wait, kind of like, when does this happen, right? When do I achieve that? Then I think you're trying to see the forest through the trees, or whatever, like, or the trees through the forest, or I don't know how that saying works, but
right. Something about trees and forests.
Yeah, and the bear shits in the woods or whatever, right? Like, but
that tree falls in the forest.
Yeah, does
the bear shit when the tree lands?
And
Who
use
knows?
Charmin, fucking Ferngully. But which is what was the Avatar? Yeah. Right? It's just Ferngully in live action.
Just adult version Ferngully.
Yeah. But I think that you are missing the point, right? If I don't want to sit around and think about like, man, I can't wait to be the father or whatever. Like, no, I'm just going to do this now. Right. Like I want to be present in what we're doing. And the brand new F-350 that I want, as much as I want that, right, it's not as nearly as important as the time I'm going to spend with my kids at the age that they're at now, or the memories they have and how all that stuff works out, right? I don't know. I think that we're all trying, and some of us, we won't know until it's too late.
Right.
Right. At the end of the day, we're going to look at it and say, hopefully on that moment, you're like, I did a good job. We'll
see.
We'll see.
Who knows?
The simulation, the computer programmer of the simulation, it's really hard, man. There's a lot of evidence where you're kind of like, I don't think this is true. And you're like, but
yeah,
it could be.
It's getting so wonky right now, especially with all the AI advancements, to not, I can't watch stuff and not, like, you can't watch Terminator and then not equate it to where we're at in current technology.
Right. You're like watching, you're
like, I've seen this one already.
Yeah.
I know how this one ends.
Yeah.
It's so wonky.
I just and I don't spend a lot of time. I do use a little bit of AI for some help with certain things, but I just saw an article and they were talking about, it might have been Google or Apple, one of the big tech companies created 2 robots that they were just stationary, but they had put some AI into it. And they started speaking in their own language, and they were like, "Oh no, turn that shit off!" Right? And they're like, "Not today." And yeah, I think all that stuff's super possible. I believe that we will probably be the end of we will be the bringers of our own destruction and some of that.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think man is going to. I don't think that's the downfall of the human race. I don't think we're going to end. I think humans, right, from a evolutionary standpoint, from like a species, like, we know how to survive.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be man, unless it's like a complete, well, even if it's a complete cataclysmic, even if the meteor comes and wipes everything out, because they talk about how that's already happened.
Yeah.
And yet we still managed to survive. So I think
life survived.
Yeah, but I think even some version of humans survived.
I don't know. I mean, well, so if you're talking about like the lost societies and stuff, like Atlantis, and some of the like the fact that there's a bunch of pyramids all around the world that were all built around the exact same time, and then all of those cultures just went away,
right?
And you're like, no, it's just like it happened. You're like, something happened.
See, I think it's super silly to think that we are the most technologically advanced that we've ever been before. I don't think that's the case. I think that humans have been far more advanced and more capable with, you name it, whether it's space travel, whether it's technology, whether it's, whatever it might be. I feel like we haven't even glimpsed how advanced it can be.
Yeah.
On this planet.
Yeah.
And because it makes total sense to me that, like, if everything got wiped out today, we have fuck all evidence that AI does not matter in the slightest
right now
in the event that everything gets wiped out.
Totally.
It's gone. There's no evidence of it. There's no history of it. There's no way to point and be like, look, Elon was putting Neuralink in people's brains. There's no way to prove that if everything gets wiped out 1,000 years from now.
Yeah.
And so I think there's been many iterations of what this looks like, and we aren't anywhere close to as advanced as it has been.
Do you think they had balance?
Probably. I think probably a lot better than we have. Sometimes I think we struggle with really asininely stupid things.
Yeah.
That, do you know what I mean? Like, if you look at things from such a bigger perspective, because truthfully too, it all comes back to me it all comes down to, what the fuck is this all about? Why are we here?
Yeah.
Right? Are we just here to make things and produce things and be more productive?
Producers, yeah.
Right? I don't think so. I think there's a much bigger reason behind all of it. And so I think it's far less about how productive we can be or how powerful we can be or how smart we can be or how technologically. I don't think those things are important in the slightest. And I think that oftentimes that might be what leads to the downfall of that version of us.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's the downfall of man as a whole. I think we always continue on in some capacity and in some way.
Some survival. Yeah. It's because the moon is a superstructure. Did you see that movie? What? Moonfall?
Right.
It's the movie that they made over Zoom during COVID. It's terrible, but it's
yeah.
What are you doing?
It could be.
It could be.
Like, I'm open to everything at this point, especially when you throw in the whole, because that's the thing is, like, I don't think I can look at life and not have the added caveat of like, oh yeah, it might just be the Matrix. And so if that's the case, then anything's possible.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, yeah, very few things, if they all of a sudden came back and they're like, there are lizard men in the grays that are living underneath the Denver airport, I'd be like, yeah, some people were right about that.
Yeah, that was totally spot on. I can see how that happened.
Yeah, yeah.
What is the whole thing with Stephanie? When I used to travel all the time, she would be like, I hate it when you have to go to Denver. I'm like, I fucking love Denver Airport.
It's not bad.
It's like one of my favorite airports. It was convenient. It was laid out nicely.
Yeah.
It was chill.
So
there were birds inside of it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'd be sitting there waiting for my flight and watch this bird go land on the drinking fountain. And so what's the whole
So I've been at the Denver
theory?
Airport. We have we have an office in Denver. So I've been to Denver Airport, I don't know, 50 times more. So, and I've done a little bit of research into this. So the Denver Airport one is like 30 minutes outside of Denver, right? So they like basically are like, oh, this is the really metropolitan city. We'll build the airport way over here.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay. It's like the most expensive airport that they have ever built by 10x.
Really?
Yeah. It was billions and billions of dollars. There's lots of little kind of like nuance art pieces that kind of go towards like the Illuminati kind of idea of the whole thing. There are vast amounts of underground tunnels and things like that go layers below.
We just want to pause real quick and thank you for tuning in and listening to Brave Men Dare. We'd like to ask you to do 3 simple things for us. First and foremost, just subscribe wherever you're listening, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of the other places you can find podcasts. By subscribing, you're going to help the podcast reach more people. Also, feel free to rate the show. Give us 5 stars if you're enjoying it. And last but not least, send an episode to a friend. All of these things are going to help the podcast reach more people and help us continue to bring you episodes week after week. Be sure to come follow us on social media as well. You can find us everywhere by searching Brave Men Dare. Now let's get back to the episode.
And on top of that, there's like I think this the theory, I don't want to say conspiracy theory, but the theory is that there are some other races, the lizard people and the grays, which is kind of like a subset of the human beings or whatever. They live underneath the Denver airport, right? And that's why all these tunnels and caverns and all that there. But it's also, I think, supposed to be the fallout shelter for the world. Okay. If like the world goes to shit, like all the leaders come in, the Illuminati all come in, right? It's, it's the Prince of the UAE and, Leonardo DiCaprio, and they all like go down into the.
I could see it.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. Yeah. You would it makes perfect sense to build something like that at an international airport.
Yeah.
So then you've got the infrastructure in place to fly everybody in, and then open up the tunnel. And
there's also down. I think from North America, it's the most centrally located, massive airport.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter where you are in the country. I think it's no more than a 3-hour flight. Something like that, right? Yeah. There's all kinds of little silly things that get into this whole thing, and you're like, huh. And if you hear one, you're like, yeah. And then as they start coming in, and you're like, oh, well, there's all this stuff there, right? That's not kind of weird. Even there's a bunch of that stuff. And I mean, there's the comedian who does the bit. He's like, listen, there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there. He's like, who I don't believe? People who don't believe in any conspiracy theories. Right. They're like, you're telling me the government's batting 1,000?
I love this guy.
Right? He's like, I have a son who I love to death. He's like, and I lie to that little motherfucker all the time.
Yes. But I freaking love that one.
But that's 100% the fact, right?
Yeah.
There's UFOs. We have been denying UFOs for decades.
Yeah.
Right? And I flew in the military. There's people who will be listening to this podcast, guys I flew with, right? And you'll be on night vision goggles and phew. And you'll be like, whoo, back. You're like, what was that? Oh.
Yeah.
Those were things that happened, right?
Where we lived in Utah, it was outside of, have you ever heard of Dugway? It's a military base.
Yep.
And it basically takes up the entire western part of the state. It's this huge facility. And Stephanie actually grew up on Dugway.
Okay.
And she worked there. And so it is one of those places that, oftentimes military bases are, they're structured in such a way where they, there's parts of the base that you can't go to. There's all of those things are really normal. But there was something about Dugway that was just really wonky. And we used to see stuff all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Because Dugway was on the other side of the mountains. And I remember there was one time I was coming home and there were all sorts of wonky lights at the top of the mountain. And it was back in, 90s or 2000s or something like that. So it was early enough that, sometimes it's like with the invention of drones, it's kind of hard now because it's easy to chalk a lot of stuff up to drones. To drones now. Yeah. But,
20 years ago.
Yeah. And, all the conspiracy people will be like, well, there were drones 20 years ago. And I'm like, yeah, there probably were. I'm sure we've had a lot of technology and things like that, but there's definitely wonky things.
Yeah.
And but I'm all about that stuff. I'm so excited when it comes to aliens, and I'm so ready for 100%. This is what it is. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's, I don't know if it's necessarily what makes more sense to me than, it's not to say that there aren't stuff on other planets and that they come here, but it makes more sense to me that it's other dimensions.
Okay.
Or that they're coming here through other means rather than, because we have such this silly way of thinking of things where we have to get into a rocket and then we have to shoot that rocket and we have to go,
why not just open a portal?
Yeah. That thought process to me is that's what I was saying earlier, where it's we're not the most technologically advanced that we've been before. Yeah. Because that idea of, well, I got to put everything in the car and then I got to drive that far. No.
Yeah.
That's
here on Earth 616.
Yeah. That's a much smaller way of thinking about things.
Yeah. I like I obviously like all the alien stuff and all that. And I remember we were on, I had to go work in China Lake. So it's in California. China Lake. It's right outside of I think it's called Ridgecrest, California. I think it's the largest base in California per square. Like if you open up a map, you're like, oh, what's this? And there's a big gray area in the middle, and that's China Lake, right?
Okay.
It's also a boneyard where they had a bunch of like old helicopters and stuff, just where they would test them. They'd be like, hey, turn this helicopter on, shoot a rocket at it, see what happens. Right? Well, myself and a couple guys I worked with just were like, hey, we need you to go to China Lake. And we ran out of gearboxes. Go take some gearboxes off these helicopters. We think they're still good. We're like, all right. So we drive out in the middle of the desert, and it takes forever for us to even get on base. And we finally like, all right. The next morning, we're like, we're ready. And they're like, hey, Marge is going to meet you here at this time, 8 o'clock in the morning, be ready. And we're like, all right. So we show up. We're all sitting there. We're in our our overalls. We're ready to work on this helicopter. And here comes this like 75-year-old woman, like the Simpsons, like big gray hair. And she's like, follow me. And she gets in this white Ford Ranger and goes 90 miles an hour down this like road that there's no signs on it. And we're 30 minutes. We're just going, we take this corner, and all of a sudden you look over, and there's maybe the largest, tallest hangar I've ever seen. And my buddy's like, what's that? And this other guy, Taylor, looks, he's like, that's where Optimus Prime is, right? Like, and it was like, yeah. And we drove another 30 miles. Not a sign, not a soul, not a nothing. And then we just show up, and we come over this hill, and there's like 30 helicopters sitting in the middle of the desert. And we're like, all right. And we drive over, and like, yeah, I guess let's rip this thing apart. It was an interesting week spent in the desert with these guys. We will always remember this trip, right? Because we also like got nothing else to do. We partied in Ridgecrest. We went to the one bar and like drank blueberry brandy and like just did weird things, right?
Yeah.
But it was a super interesting trip to the point like at the end I'm out there in just like a pair of shorts because it's 105 degrees or something in the middle of the California desert. We're just tearing apart a helicopter, and you just be like, yeah, what else is going on out here? Like, oh, we don't talk about that. Like they were under strict instructions, like don't leave. Well, I don't know. I don't even know how we got here.
Right.
Marge is coming back at 1600 to drive us back out of here. Well, I have no idea. Where was the turn at? I don't even know where the hell we are. But yeah, so I know where Optimus Prime is. He's in China Lake, California. Yeah. But there's all kinds of crazy stuff like that out there. And military bases are 100% like that.
Yeah. My dad worked on one not for a long time, for his whole fucking career. That's what he did, was he worked on a military base, and it's where they did a lot of testing and training and all sorts of different stuff. And yeah, I don't know, dude. The level of, like you were saying earlier, where there's 100% shit that they're not telling us.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff that they're not telling us.
Think about everything that we know today to be true.
Mm-hmm.
Think about all the things that we know today to be true that we didn't know 10 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Even the idea that like the Earth is the center of the universe, right? Maybe it is. We don't think that is. The Earth is flat. There are some people who still believe that. The electricity, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like if you look at like the evolutionary of just technology that we've had in this exponential growth side, electricity wasn't even really known about 200 years ago, or no, 300 years ago, right? Computers, this thing, I mean, think about it. This, right? The iPhone came out in 2007, I think, right?
Yeah.
We're not even 20 years into the iPhone. And this thing is more powerful than any, computer we had 10 years ago.
Yeah. And
you look at, AI. Just think about how far it's come in 3 years. I mean, I think AI really came out 2 years ago.
Are you excited by all of it? Or are you, because I feel like, why waste time being scared about it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's
I feel
coming.
like, yeah, I feel like you could go back in history, and with every technological advancement, right? When fire came around, when somebody was like, "Look what I fucking found,"
fire deniers,
and I knew how to fucking like I can make this shit now. Kill that motherfucker. Get rid of that
Witchcraft.
guy. Yeah, we're done with that fucking guy. Whew, glad we got rid of that fucking guy that talked about that shit.
Right, the first guy who rolled a wheel, and you were like, "Oh,"
you're like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Like, we're busy over here, and you're over.
Every time we've come out with something, right? The telegraph, the radio,
horseless carriages.
Yes. All of it has come with immense amount of paranoia and fear of like, well, this is the end of it. This is the demise of society as a whole. This is going to kill us all. And yet we're still here. And so I feel like we have proof evident that AI isn't going to do anything other than push the ball forward. It's going to help us out. There's going to be lots of really beneficial things and a lot of really not beneficial things. And that's the same old story that it always is. And then eventually it's going to create the next thing and create the next thing and create the next thing. But I have a question for you, because this gets talked about a lot too on podcasts and everything like that. But watching like Chimp Nation, and then I recently watched the other one that they came out with, Chimp Crazy. I don't know what it is. It's the one that's on HBO where the lady's got the, gosh, I think it's Chimp Crazy.
Okay.
But it's the same guys that did Joe Exotic, that did Tiger King, the same documentary guys. And it's all about this woman that, it's the people that lived with chimps, that have chimps in their home.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yes.
So it's that whole.
They're like, we have 17 baby spider monkeys. And you're like.
Yeah. And it's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
It's bananas. But watching it and watching chimpanzees, seeing how similar, like there's a clip in that documentary, and I don't even know if documentary, I feel like documentary is like a word that's used, like when I think about a documentary, it's something that's going to educate me and,
Joe Exotic.
Yeah.
Not.
Yeah.
I'm never going to financially recover from this.
So I don't know if we can, it's a stretch to call this a documentary, but it's definitely entertaining. And there's a clip where there's, so the woman is part of the circus. She grew up in the circus, and now that's her show where she goes around with chimps and does a show, puts on a show with the chimps. And it's showing like VHS footage of them getting ready for their performance. And there's a line of chimps sitting on the tailgate of the pickup truck, getting dressed, putting on their pants, putting on their shirts, totally just sitting there completely like, now granted, they could have been trained to do that, but at the same time, I think the chimps just learned how to get dressed and do things that humans do. So they're super close to us, right? Yep. And then the question is, what happened along the lines throughout evolution where humans made this massive leap?
Yeah.
Right. Where we went from very much being exactly like chimpanzees to where we're at today.
Yeah.
And in your mind, what is that?
So do
you have a theory?
I have a question.
Okay.
Because if we evolved from chimps, or like along that line, right? Maybe at some point our family tree in evolutionary means split. And one way went to the chimps, and one way went to the Homo sapiens, right? If evolution is to better find ourselves more adaptable into the environment and all that, why didn't the chimps evolve the same way?
Right. Well, they say that they are still, that like now chimps are in the phase of evolution where they're using tools. So they're just like we at some point along the lines were using rocks and all those kind of things. That's where chimps are at right now.
One day a chimp in the zoo is going to rub two sticks together and light the whole thing on fire.
Make fucking fire.
Yeah. They're going to be like, oh. Yeah. It's what's that? Oh, what a wonderful day. I think that I think that I do think that we're still evolving. I mean, if you look at it, like even humans today, I believe, I could totally be making this shit up, but I think that there are less.
Wait a minute. We're scientists.
We are.
Right?
I actually have a lab coat.
I've got a PhD, so.
I have a lab coat.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I have a megaphone, and you will listen to everything I have to say. I think that I believe there are more children born today without wisdom teeth than there were 20 years ago, right? Like, I only had 2 wisdom teeth. My mom had all 4, right? Like, I only had to have 2, or not wisdom teeth. They had to be removed, right? Because our jaws are changing over time. So I think we're still evolving in some of that stuff. Humans overall are, I think, taller. So I think we're always still evolving. But I think that...
Well, like the tailbone.
Right. Like,
we still have some of those things.
Yeah. I think that I think it'll be really interesting to see. I mean, it's going to not happen in our lifetime probably, but to see where all this goes. I think that technology is going to be a big part of that. I don't know if it's good or bad, right? Because that's what kind of brings me is like, if we're not the most technologically advanced society that this planet has ever seen, why aren't they still here? Did they develop AI that then just wiped them out? Right? Did that happen 15,000 years ago, that they developed some kind of system that was like, oh, I know how to ruin these motherfuckers, right? And it like created something, and it wiped out the entire most of the population minus some cave dwellers, right? That were like, whoo, those weirdos over there with their bathrobes, we don't want nothing to do with them. And that's what we're descendants of, is all that. I don't know. I think that... Yeah, I don't know, man.
Do you have a theory on how we went from chimps to where we're at today?
I think that... No, I don't. I honestly don't understand. I know that we can look at these like fossils and things that we find that are like, oh, Molly here is 200,000 years old and she's kind of in between, or, this kind of happened. There's so few, like we have more dinosaur bones from 65 million years ago.
Is there some conspiracy that dinosaurs aren't real?
Well, so like, okay. I don't know if you listen to...
I'm sure there is, right?
I'm sure. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, like, somebody told me once, I saw this when I was at boot camp. On a Sunday at boot camp, it was like worship day. So, like, everybody gets to go to their own churches and all that stuff. And I was bored. Like, my service wasn't in that day. So they're like, hey, what, I was like, I'll go with you. Like, whatever. And it was, I don't remember what it was, but we sat there and there was a screen and they were just put a VHS in and we were watching this. And the guy's like, yeah, the word prehistoric wasn't in the dictionary until like 1875. Dinosaurs before that were just thought of like old big lizards. And you're like, huh, like, all right. Or the idea, like, I was listening to this guy talk about how they find dinosaur bones, especially in like rock and all that. They have a rock that they are chiseling away. And then when they feel like they've gotten to a different texture or feeling or thickness or hardness or whatever, then they start to chisel around that. And I watched this video where this guy's cutting out this like dinosaur bone. And if you put that video next to somebody who like, hey, here's a rock, cut out a dinosaur bone, it was the same, right? And I was kind of like, hang on a minute.
Archaeologists are really good sculptors.
But I don't know how, I don't understand in the idea of like human evolution. And I am not, my name's not Darwin, so I don't quite understand all this. And I am not the best scientist at all this. But I don't understand why we evolved and others didn't. What stopped this group from this kind of progression? If we've had the same, if we come from the same genetic line, if we have the same common ancestors, was that just the runts that never made it? Like, was that just like, oh, like...
Well, some of the theories that they kick around is like... There's one where mushrooms. So we are migrating because we're not hunters and gatherers. Yep. We're migrating with the herds and all the ungulates, and we're flipping over cow pies and we're eating mushrooms, and that's sparking all sorts of different stuff in our brains and doing all the things that psilocybin does. And so that's one theory. There's crazy theories, and I shouldn't say crazy. I don't think any of these theories are crazy, but that, some advanced species came here and then altered our DNA in some capacity.
Yeah.
I think because
we're the science experiment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm all for that. Like, I'm totally fine with alien DNA. But I think it's much simpler. And I think that I can imagine a world, because there was some, oh gosh, he's been on Rogan a ton. It's Graham Hancock, and I can't remember the other guy's name, but there's these two guys. One of them I think is an archaeologist, and the other one is just a really good researcher. And I think Graham Hancock is the researcher guy. Anyways, ancient civilizations, all these kind of things. And there's the meteor impact. And so the whole idea that, 12,000 years ago, there was a meteor that took out the vast majority of the world and restarted life. And they also have found underground, not necessarily structures, but caves where it appears that humans lived and survived. And so there's theories around, okay, we know it's coming. So we go to the Denver airport.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a thing that I think that at some point throughout history, man has definitely survived underground.
Yeah.
So it's easy for me to imagine, okay, so there's hardly any life left on the planet, and we've only got X number of humans alive still. And at some point along the way, because we still have to procreate and we still have to make more of us, and we have run out of the capacity to breed with just in our own species, that it would make sense to me that we would go to the very next thing that's closest in regards to, like, if you're going to pick something to breed with in order to perpetuate the race, to perpetuate the
You'd
species,
pick like the next.
you're going to pick the thing that's closest.
Yeah.
And that's going to be an ape. And so it would make sense to me that that's all that it is. It's not some fantastical thing where we've got aliens that have come down to, perform some massive experiment on our species. It's more about just, again, survival.
Yeah.
And we're to a point. And if you think about it too, because I think oftentimes, like, my whole theory around we're not the most technologically advanced that we've been before. Right now, we still have, tribes, communities on the planet that are hunters and gatherers that are living very much the same way that we think humans lived 5,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, still existing today, coinciding at the exact same time. And we might be aware of them, but they're not aware of us.
Yeah. They don't know that Ben and Craig are sitting here doing a podcast right now.
Right. So they don't have the contextual understanding.
Doing their thing.
Exactly. So that still happens today. So the world ends and Ben and Craig are gone, technology's gone, but hunters and gatherers are still going to be around, right? They're still going to be surviving. They're still going to be doing their thing. And even from that perspective, it would make sense to me that, again, it's just like, it's not a big stretch in my brain to think that we would get to a point where, okay, we don't have the ability to procreate like we normally would, or we ideally would, but we're going to do some form or fashion of that in order to continue. And that's how the current version of what we are today has come to be.
I mean, I think that there's some observable sense, like, in that, right? So as you're talking about this, the idea of, like, okay, if we had a society 12, 15,000 years ago that was much more advanced, right? And we're like, well, where did all the evidence go, right? Look around the world today. I mean, where we live, how many houses can you drive by that were probably occupied in the last 100 years that are almost completely taken back over by nature?
Yeah.
Right? Building materials, wood, like that decomposes, right? Even rock erodes, and mortar and all that stuff, right? And if you look at the idea of, like, in the Amazon, right? So, like, they were like, oh yeah, like, we're not really ever sure what happened here. And then one day they used technology. They flew over the Amazon rainforest with LiDAR.
Right.
And they see, like, oh shit, there's thousands of miles of roads and irrigation and all this that's buried underneath. And they're like, and we think all this happened a couple 100 years ago, right? And the rainforest was just like, no, that shit's mine, right? Because everybody died or whatever, right? I mean, even if you look at I don't remember the Aztec temple or whatever, but like when they kind of rediscovered it, right? They're like, oh, look at this kind of thing over here. And then one day it's like, I mean, how far down do you think this goes? And they're like, oh shit, it's 40 meters, or not 40. That's a lot. It's 40 feet below what we think it is today. And they dug all the way down and they're like, oh shit, like this whole thing is massive. People lived there 200, 300 years ago, right? Until the dang Spanish came and killed everybody, right? Dang Spaniards. But so I could totally understand where you're like, yeah, where's the evidence of all these societies from 12,000 years ago? I'm like, yeah, it's gone.
Really easy. And all of this will be gone.
Yeah.
All of it's going to be gone.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about something like an asteroid.
Yeah.
Right? That just changes the complete face of the planet for however long, right? I mean, thousands of years.
Take away electricity, right? And instantaneously, the whole world changes. Mm-hmm. Everything that we have from this to lights, it's all gone. We go back to candles and firewood, and now you're not like the ability to make gasoline and petrol and all that, like that goes away. So now transportation is changing. And how long does it take for the roads to break up back into rock? And, not very long. Yeah. And I think that's all super, super possible. I believe if that is what has happened, that it's not far-fetched, right?
Right. It totally makes sense.
Yeah. First of all, this is maybe my favorite. Like, we have to come up with a really good title for this episode. Okay. We're like PTSD and alien civilizations, right?
Yeah.
Because we had a good flow here. Yeah. Let's talk about emotions and the grays,
And the grays. It'll be interesting to see. I'm excited to see what's next, right? I think, you go back in time to when we were growing up in the 80s and, if we were to say, hey, at some point you're going to walk around with these things in your pocket, all the advancements that we've experienced over the course of our lifetime have been amazing. Yeah. And I'm so excited to see what's next. Yeah. Like, I'm all for all of this. I'm not in the camp that we have to be afraid of any of it. No. I'm really not. I don't think that it's going to be the end. I don't think suddenly AI is going to take over. I don't think it's going to, all of those things, I think, again, are just from the small-minded, sorry, that's not the right way to say it. It's not to say that people that think that way are small-minded, but it's from this fear-based processing. It's from the idea that,
change is bad.
Exactly. Change is bad. Change is going to kill us. And that is a pattern that we have seen over and over and over again not be the case. Yeah. Right. We've managed to survive every evolutionary advancement that we've created so far. And I feel like this is going to be the same one.
To some regard.
What do you mean?
We've survived it to some regard.
We're still here?
Yeah. We are still here, right? But if you were to think about, like, if there was this, say there was, let's just call it 10 million humans 12,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. And then the asteroid hit that supposedly did all this, and there was only a couple thousand.
Yeah, I think they say something like 8,000 or something like that.
Which is crazy.
It got down really low.
Right? I mean,
which I don't even know how they fucking know that. Right. Like, that's the other thing. There's so much science. We're basically scientists, right? We're just, could have been, we had sex with chimps.
I'm a scientist.
I thought about this for a while. I think we had sex with chimps.
And you're like, no, that's a creep.
What happened.
That's what it is. You're just a weirdo.
Because there's no way to know.
Yeah. There's no way to observe. Yeah. Right? Which is really, to be honest, like, my son and I were talking about this and the idea of, like, what is science? Science is the ability to observe. And if you can't observe, everything else is theory. Mm-hmm. Right? We don't know. We have a theory. But proof is really, really hard to, like, put out there unless it was observed. And I don't know anybody that old, right? There's just, if you can't observe it, then did it actually happen?
Right.
Right. It's like, what's the Schrodinger's cat? Where you put the cat in the box with a nuclear reactive or the radioactive isotope.
Not familiar with
You don't
this
know what
test,
the, okay,
no.
so like the whole
This
idea, and I'm
animal
doing a
torture.
terrible job of it's called
Put the
like
cat in a
Schrodinger's
box with some
radioactive material.
Okay.
And you seal it. You can't observe it. So at both possibilities are true. At any given moment, the cat is alive and the cat is dead. Right? I'm doing a terrible job with this.
That's great.
But until you open the box, both realities are 100% true because you have no way to prove them false.
Right.
Right. So it's I used to think, and this is terrible, when like the Pepsi challenge where like you twisted off the cap and you could win stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In my brain, that was constantly changing underneath that cap was always changing until I twisted it off until I observed it. As soon as I observed it,
yeah,
that's where I am, right?
Yeah.
It was always just rapidly, randomly changing until I observed it. And you can't prove me wrong because it would have to take some kind of observation to make that happen, right?
Well, they talk about how our observation will influence things, where, we're not doing anything other than observing it and it's reacting.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely something to it.
Yeah. For all of the people that I went to school with back when I was in school and the people who remember when I used to be smart, I will do some more research on this cat in the box, and that way I can make sure I'm sharing the correct information. I don't want to steer anyone astray with my pseudoscience and my... Like, listen,
I don't think people are coming to this podcast for the science. Okay.
You don't know that.
If
we should start putting lab coats
we
on.
should. We definitely need to be doing scientific episodes where we solve the world's mysteries.
Problems with. We could do that as like our after hours.
There you go.
Yeah. But I think that there's a lot of really cool things happening. I think that there's going to be. I don't think that there'll ever be a point where we like, oh, we've gone too far or anything like that, because it's always evolving, right? Everything's always evolving. I'm sure the first time somebody got on a horse, they're like, hang on a minute. So you're going to get on that thing? That 2,000-pound pissed off thing that kicks and kills dozens of people and you're going to ride it?
Yeah.
No. Or the first person like, hey, the thing that stepped on my village, the elephant, I'm going to go ride it. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Right. But I think that I don't think that we'll ever get to a point that it's going to, I mean, who knows? I could be 100% wrong, but I don't think we'll ever get to the point. It's not going to be the mass extinction because we did any of this stuff. I do think that as much as we can prepare for the good stuff, or as much as we can be open to the possibilities and all that, I think you've always got to be a little prepared for things to go sideways. And, I guess, I don't know. I've read too many bad books about like what happens if the EMP goes off and like people who weren't prepared just die,
Yeah, they will.
Yeah.
They'll just die.
That's 100% what happens.
I'm ready for the robots though.
The robots?
I'm so ready for
Data.
I want, do my fucking dishes.
Roxy.
Do my fucking laundry.
What was in the Jetsons? What was
Their
the
dog's name?
No, what was the robot's name? Was it Roxy? Rosie.
Yeah.
The robot. Dude, Rosie would be sweet.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Yeah.
I'm ready for my AI robot that can come and take care of the house and go mow the lawn, robot. Go take care of these things that, frees us up to be more creative and spend more time doing the things that we want to do.
Would probably just give us more time to push advancements even further.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Or to just relax more.
And I'm fine with them creating, let them do their thing. I'm fine with letting them loose and let them evolve. That's fine. I'm not afraid of that. I think it's good. Until
they come back and they're like, John Connor.
But see, it's like that to me, again, is just like, that's the fear part of it. I don't think they're coming back. I don't think, there's Battlestar Galactica. I don't know if you ever got down that one with the Cylons and
Bears,
everything
Beats,
like that.
Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah. If that's the case and the Cylons come back and they fucking wipe us out, who am I to complain? It just is what it is.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to happen. And I'm not going to spend time and energy being fearful about the doom of AI being the end of humanity. In the meantime, I'm just going to reach out to ChatGPT and figure out how
What's
I can
the best
write
way
this
to
email
write this?
better. Yeah.
I had ChatGPT do my entire review last year.
Right.
My performance review for the whole year. I typed in a bunch of stuff and went through a bunch of iterations, and I was like,
Yeah.
it's pretty
they
good.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
They
I
nailed
don't
it.
think it ever got reviewed, but so.
Well, this is another wonderful episode of Brave Men Dare. And we're trying to figure out exactly where we're going in all of these episodes. And you're coming along for the journey because obviously this is a good example of we don't know what's coming up next.
No.
It could be anything.
Robots.
Yeah.
Chimp
PTSD,
robots.
chimp robots.
Chimp robots.
AI chimp sex robots.
Yes. I definitely think that for one, please subscribe, continue to watch. I think there is nothing but good. This is good. We're just scratching the surface.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I think some of the episodes that we've talked about that we're going to be looking into are going to be, I'm really excited to do them.
Me too.
Right. So yeah, subscribe, hit that bell, right?
Go follow us on YouTube, send an episode to your favorite, or send one of your favorite episodes to a friend. All of those things, all that stuff helps the podcast grow. It's a brand new podcast. And the way to help podcasts, if you're into this podcast or if you're a fan of it, just subscribe, rate it, leave us a review, and then share it with somebody. Those are 3 or 4 things that you can do that would take less than 5 minutes, and it would help the podcast immensely. And we would be deeply grateful. So
Super grateful.
Yeah.
Absolutely grateful. Yeah. Follow us. If you know anybody, please let us know a little bit. If you know more about the Denver airport, right? Because I'll be honest, I'm an amateur when it comes to the Denver airport conspiracy theory, or theory. We're not, not conspiracy. If you know more, comment. Let us know.
Yeah.
Right.
I would love to go there and experience whatever's going on.
We could do an episode where we just wander
through the Denver airport. Looking for the tunnels.
If you want to see an episode of me and Craig walking around the Denver airport asking security where the grays are.
How funny would it be to just fly there specifically? Where'd you go? We just went to the Denver airport.
We just bought
There's
tons of stuff to do there.
Right? We could totally just go there and film a bunch of content, hang out, go and search for all the different shit that's there. That would be fun.
That would be fun. I think that's a wonderful idea. We'll call it Brave Men Dare on the Road. Brave Men Dare Road Show.
Hunting down conspiracy theories at the Denver airport. Tune in next week, folks. We'll see what's happening.
Yep.
Thank you,
All right,
brother.
buddy.
Love you.
Love you, man. This is great.